Well, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be in the world joining us today. It's been a while since our last advanced practitioner call, so I'm excited we were able to put one on. Hopefully we'll have more for you this fall. I did want to let everyone know this is our very first time using Microsoft Teams for a webinar. They just released webinar functionality a couple of months ago, so it's very new to us. Hopefully it works okay, but if there's any glitches along the way, please do be patient. Hopefully it works like a dream, but you never know with new technology. So we'll do the best we can as we move along. As I mentioned, we are recording this session and we will be sending out the link after for you to rewatch and share if you like. I will be monitoring the chat, so if you have questions, feel free to use the chat as well. You can also request to be unmuted so you can talk directly with our presenters today. Before we kick off, I wanted to give a brief overview of StrataCom just in case you've never met us before and you don't know who we are. We were founded in 1997 and we've always done IT service management. That's always been our space in IT. We worked with a lot of the enterprise players in the past, originally Tivoli, IBM, HP, Peregrine, Remedy, BMC, some of those familiar names. We've been a Cherwell partner since 2012, so we were one of the first Cherwell partners on when they launched their partner program back in the day. And we've got a large staff of very senior consultants. Professional services is our bread and butter. It's what we do every day. In the last few years, we have also dabbled into the product market for some add-ons at the request of our customers. We developed a mobile app for Cherwell, Kanban boards for Cherwell, and coming very soon, we're going to be launching a smart chatbot for Cherwell as well. So if we could ever be of interest for services or solution add-ons, reach out anytime. Our presenter today is Bill Renfro. Bill is one of our founding owners. He's been with us from the very beginning, so he's got a wealth of expertise in solutions, but especially business process as well. And at a large scale, Bill's worked for some of the largest ITSM installs in the country. We also have Kim Euchre, one of our very senior Cherwell consultants listening in, and she may chime in with tips and information as we go along today. All right, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Bill to dig into what you're all here to see.
So Laura, while you were talking, I admitted probably 15, 20 people in the, excuse me, from the lobby. So if it shows up on the participants list, like another one just popped up, once I start sharing, I won't be able to monitor that. So can you keep an eye on that, please?
I'm all over it. Thanks, Bill.
Bill,
As Laura said, you
I'm
got
also,
it.
Yep, I've
Great,
been
thanks.
admitting people left and right.
Yeah, so as Laura said, this is our first time using the Teams webinar, so our apologies, just leave it at that. So I'm going to share, we'll start giving some background and then hop into SLAs right away. All right, so this is Cherwell SLAs. How do they actually work? And you all saw that on the invite, I'm sure. Laura gave some background about our company. And again, yes, I've been working with ITSM products of one form or another since 1994. StrataCom started in 1997. I've been working with Cherwell since 2015. I was certified the fall of that year on version 5, I believe it. Timelines get a little fuzzy, but somewhere in there. Kim, I'll let you do your own intro.
I've been working with StrataCom since 2004, and I've been working with Cherwell since 2012. And I was the first person here trained in Cherwell, and so again, I have the most senior in terms of Cherwell here.
All right. So Kim actually, as she said, has more experience with this than I do, and is quite frankly better at it than I am usually. But once in a while, I find something she has not figured out. But anyway, she was really busy when this webinar topic originally came up. I saw a lot of postings with SLA questions in the Cherwell community over a few months and decided this would be a good topic for us to tackle. And so I signed up to do it. And Kim is on here to help if there's any complicated questions, because she is really driven into the guts of this thing and projects modifying it and understands it really well as well. So, all right, so what are server SLAs anyway? Service level agreements typically are a business's published response goals for the service desk. We, as people who are in it all the time, think of it as metrics, but to the customer, it's like being told that 95% of the time, if you have a standard known issue, we're going to get it resolved within a business day, and we're going to respond to you in like 2 hours. So those are the things that we typically always think of when we talk about SLAs: the response time and then the resolution time. But as a help desk technician or a manager in the help desk or anyone on the supply side of meeting that demand for help, you also want warnings. So with our SLAs, we usually think of them as having warning times too. So if something is not responded to, you're going to get a notification. Or if something is going to breach the SLAs, you get a warning. And all of these measurements in the end show success if something was within the SLA, it breached because it failed to meet it, or it might be in progress still, which, you know, is pretty much a typical day at the help desk. So out of the box, SLAs have, you know, these following important parts, and we're going to hop back and forth here a little bit between the user tool and the presentation. I don't think anybody loves just watching the presentation and just waiting for my Cherwell instance to come up, which apparently I forgot to click the thing before we started. So I'll talk through the slide a little bit while I'm waiting for that. Everybody's seen an SLA. We've got the title, we have a subscription level and type. This is the demons of demos, right? There we go, it's popping up. Wow. I'm in my basement where the Wi-Fi isn't great because I have kids and they're making noise upstairs. So my apologies, this is taking a bit, but the Cherwell SLAs have okay, this is taking forever, my apologies.
It'll be up any second.
Yeah, there it goes. And I don't know if... Right. I don't know if all of you heard the giant thunder in the background. Like I said, it is storming here. So out of the box, this is version 10.2, by the way, just so you know. There have been SLA changes over the versions, but we're going to look at the most generic vanilla SLA that exists out there, which is the corporate one. For the vast majority of people who use SLAs, this is the one you're going to use. And it's the one that most people modify slightly and it works for their company and they don't have to go much farther than that. Okay, so this
Bill?
is a, yes.
This is also, I think, covered later on, but this is actually where I would suggest that people start. Implement the corporate SLA that find the most generic of the requirements, and then as they need, they can expand out to other SLAs.
Yes. And that is excellent advice. When you start with SLAs, you don't want to, if you've never done them inside Cherwell to actually measure things, you do want to start at a simple level. And this is the one that you would start with. So the subscription level, this is informational. It doesn't really drive a lot of workflow functionality in the back. The SLA type, on the other hand, absolutely does. So you can have 4 different SLA types. They're somewhat self-descriptive here, but configuration item obviously refers to SLAs tied back to things like servers or things that affect multiple people. Your corporate, which is the overarching that affects everybody. Customer, which gets very specific down to either individuals or groups of individuals. That's one of the more complex implementation types. We're not going to go too heavy into that today because there's so much with SLAs that we have to limit this to an hour. So look at there. And then service, and this is tied back to the actual services defined within the Cherwell service catalog, or not the service catalog, but the Cherwell services, so the top tier for categorization in incident change and the other modules. So you can have different SLAs based on each service. And I wanted to go through this in a certain order, so I'm just going to hop back here. Okay. There's advanced options for each SLA. Allow stop the clock. We'll talk through in detail later. Check errors on save and disable the target time wizard. These don't really do anything in terms of functionality for the SLA itself. This target time wizard, I actually like it. We'll get into that in a minute. But if you come in here and you create a new SLA and you can see there's other things like the priority group, the start dates, end dates, and the review date. This actually gives you a notification. So you probably want to review these every year, but nothing on this screen at all measures anything. This is just the container for a whole bunch of other stuff that we're going to actually look at next. So stop the clock. If you have this checked and an incident, for example, is going to breach at 2 p.m. and you put it in stop the clock at 1 p.m., it will not breach if you have this enabled. 2 o'clock will come and go. And let's say your business hours close at 5 and you open back up at 8 a.m. and it gets to be noon the next day. So you're now 22 hours clockwise past your breach time. It is not going to do anything until you take it out of pending. And when you take it out of pending, it's going to check and see how much time has elapsed since you put it into pending, and then add that back onto your breach times, your warning times, and everything. If you do not have this checked, it's going to go ahead and breach. So that's probably the most important thing in here. Most organizations do allow stop the clock. They may not for an individual service or an individual CI. I mean, if you have a certain server down that everyone is dependent on, then you probably would not do that. So moving on from stop the clock, we've talked through these a little bit, the different types. So there's the corporate, the service, the individual, and the CI, but these can actually overlap. And how that works, we'll get into in a little more detail later on. But this is something that Kim had mentioned before. When you're starting to implement SLAs at first, go ahead and just pick one. Pick your easiest, simplest one that covers the most people for the simplest use cases, and then work on becoming more complex. Or as I say, first crawl, then walk, then run. So that's what we just looked at.
Hey, Bill, we've got a quick question in the chat.
Okay.
Are you able to see it, or would you like me to read it?
I can probably flip back there. Hang on.
Actually, we've got two from Tom and AJ.
In my example, there's still an hour of time remaining before the breach, yes. So if it's already breached, then it's going to, if it's already breached, there's nothing to take that back per se. Although I'm going to tell you the exception to that later on. But originally, once it's breached, it's breached. And as far as AJ, oh, hi AJ. If there's a specific SLA or mechanism to monitor, alert the duration an incident is pending, not out of the box, there's not. I've seen people make a pending review date and add that and make a notification, but most of the time, like one of the customers I work with on and off now for years, they actually have had some abuse of that, and they did. They basically covered it with reporting. So the managers keep a report where they look at how long something's been in pending and then go back and yell at their people as appropriate. So, Kim, do you have anything to add to that?
Nope, you did fine.
Okay. All right. So as we said, none of that stuff in the SLA does anything at all. It doesn't do anything. All of the everything that's important is in these two tabs, the SLA target times and the priority matrix elements, which we'll get to in a minute. So these SLA target times, as you can see, there is one of these for every single type of incident. So either incidents or service request, plus the priority level. So that's the combination of urgency and, well, the priority matrix, basically. So you have to define one of these for everyone. And it's pretty straightforward. You can see the priority is set, the type, the work hours. Now, this is actually selecting from your business hours manager. And if you're not familiar with what this is, I'll talk about it really quickly, but we'll edit one of these. So this calendar is 8 to 5, Monday through Friday. You can see Sundays are marked closed. Mondays and every other weekday are marked like this one, 8 to 5. And then Saturdays are also marked closed. And then in the bottom, you can have exceptions. July 4th was a Sunday this year, but let's say if it had been on Monday, you can mark it closed. So these calendars do need to be updated. We talk about that a little bit later on. But changing these calendars is actually pretty easy. So one thing that we suggest that is not out of the box is create a calendar called 24/7 and do exactly what it sounds like. Make it every day, 12 a.m. to 11:59 p.m. open, because we have seen issues with SLAs out of the box if you're using this 24/7 radio button. I don't know specifically if there's issues in 10.2 or it's resolved, but definitely in previous versions, there were certain use cases where that was problematic. So if you ever run into an issue where you're trying to calculate on a 24-hour clock and having issues using this radio button, switch to a new calendar defined as 24/7.
It's because it's looking for a set of work hours, even when that 24/7 is set. And that's why the 24/7 calendar, takes that place of the missing calendar.
Okay. So I didn't explicitly say it, so I'll say it, but I think everybody understands. So what this is saying is that priority level 1 incidents will be responded to in 1 hour and will be resolved in 5 hours. And you can set the units and the days, or I'm sorry, the units being hours, minutes, days, and the number for all of these. So those really drive a lot of the response time stuff. And then there's the priority matrix elements. So I just want to make sure I'm going through this in the order I wanted to. So we talked about target times, the target time details. Okay, so for the priority matrix elements, there's also, once again, one record for every priority for each incident and for each parent type. So obviously you can make this apply to other business objects. You can make this apply to change, problem, anything. But instance kind of unique because there's multiple parent types. So there's service requests and there's incidents. So again, for every single possible combination of those two, there's a priority matrix element as well. And these just define the urgency and such, and they're used in the calculations. So
We've got another question in the chat as well.
If you'd like, we can read it to you.
Yeah, would you?
Okay, Kevin 6 asks, can you talk a little bit about the Cherwell views, the difference between 24 hours and 1 day in either response or resolution time? It's pretty strange and confused me for a bit, but treats them differently.
Sure. So that was back on this. What we're saying is this 24/7 radio button calculations, at least in previous versions, had some issues calculating certain things. So instead of using this, we recommend creating a calendar called 24/7 that is essentially the same thing as the radio button, but it calculates better, at least in some instances. Kim, I know you've run into more than I have, so.
Yeah, but I think I may understand. I think he's asking more like, and Kevin would have to confirm, but are you using like an 8 to 5 Monday through Friday clock and you're looking at the difference between 24 hours in one day?
Okay, yes, so.
Because that's going to be considerably different. He says, yes, I am. That's what I mean.
Okay. So these concepts get interesting, and they get really interesting if you have an organization spanning multiple time zones. So when you use a calendar like this one, it only counts time towards those incident warnings and breaches if you are within the time frame specified in one of these calendars. So in the 24/7, it's obviously the same as real time. But in these, if you, let's say you're working on the weekend and you go put in an issue because you can't log in to your help desk, the help desk doesn't even start that counter until 8 o'clock the following day. So even though the response time might be 3 hours or something, if you put it in on Sunday, the response time counter won't start until 8 a.m. and it won't fire if it's 3 hours until 11 a.m. Same thing for the breaches and the warnings. Now, where this gets really complicated is when you span multiple time zones. I worked with the US Postal Service for many years. And if you ask somebody how long a day is, if they're going to say 24 hours and look at you funny, but the reality is from 12 o'clock a.m. in Maine to 11:59 p.m. in Hawaii is considerably longer than 24 hours. I think it's 31, if I remember correctly. And what organizations end up doing is usually having to pick a time zone as their specific service delivery time zone, because that math on that gets crazy hard really fast. So something to keep in mind if you're a larger organization. So we talked a little bit about priority matrix. So if you are starting from scratch, we're going to share this presentation afterwards, but you can actually go to help.cherwell.com and search for the SLA Priority Spreadsheet. And they have a template out there that works through all of this. So it shows you how to define everything for these SLA target times and the SLA priority matrix. And then you can do it yourself. So this is actually really useful. I didn't know this actually even existed until I started getting this webinar together. And I was going through the help just to verify a couple of things I was saying, because this is complex. And by the way, it changed from previous versions. There was a whole different way SLAs were calculated in the past. So I was just keeping myself honest and double checking. So I made a separate slide for this just because this is actually really, really useful. If you were going to start SLAs from scratch on a new business object like change or problem, I would highly recommend doing this. So I don't have anything else to say about that, but it gives you a really, really good starting point into something that might otherwise be intimidating. So a new incident comes in and you have multiple SLAs defined, right? You might have some service, customer, config, or request types. And how do you know which SLA is going to get chosen? It's kind of hard. When you go and you look at a list of SLAs here, you go back to like this grid view, say no to that. You know, maybe more than one of these could apply to me. I could be corporate, but I could be, you know, a CEO or a VIP, and I'm going to expect faster time. It might affect a specific server or whatever. There's different ones of these that could apply. So priority drives which target time gets selected by an SLA. So once you've got the SLA down, that's what chooses the service times. But the order of operations for SLA is pretty interesting. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at a few things here. So I'm going to go in, I'm going to create a new instance. When you're configuring SLAs, you have the option to make one of them the default SLA. Out of the box, corporate is the default SLA. Okay, so I have a new incident here. I've done nothing at all in this incident. We go look at System Analyzer, and I open up the SLA. You can see the corporate SLA has applied here without me doing anything at all. Now, if I go in and I choose a customer, and I'm gonna go ahead and choose John, because he's the manager. You can see this changed. This changed to silver because he's actually specifically named as a customer SLA. I could go choose a configuration item that was a server. It would change this again. You're also going to see that this created during gets set. And we're going to get more into detail on this in a minute. But this sets the calendar before I've even saved the SLA, or I'm sorry, save the incident, this gets set. And this is used pretty specifically later on to calculate the SLA. So getting back to this. So the default SLA applies to the new incident. Created during is calculated. The breach times calculate. We can see this actually. We'll look back in here. And Kim, where are the breach times?
You're in a separate folder called you're in the statistics folder. Go up. Go up to the top and just type in warning. You're in the SLA folder.
Yeah. So these actually calculate when you save, sorry. But anytime you make a change to the service, the customer, the CI, the type, or the priority, the SLA can recalculate and a different one can apply. And then the automation process monitor checks those times once those are calculated and does the appropriate warnings and follow-ups. And then when it breaches, it'll update the record with the breach information. So, and now you're all saying, right, but you still haven't told me how it works. How does it actually choose which one? And that's what we're going to get into now. Have there been any other questions in the meantime? All right, I just needed a coffee break, sorry. That's the question. But if you go look at incident out of the box and you look at the relationships, there are 13 different relationships tied back to SLAs. One of them is the SLM history, so just ignore that. The other 12 are used to evaluate which SLA is quote unquote the right SLA. And again, any change to the incident can cause this to recalculate at any time. So these 12, you can see it's the CI SLA, and then there's the customer SLA and the target times, and so on and so forth. These all come into play when this is happening. So
and
when
it any of those. I just said you shouldn't remove any of those relationships. They're all required.
Yeah, we have seen instances where somebody was cleaning up their system and thought these were unnecessary and just got rid of all of them. Don't do that. You can obviously re-import them later on, but it causes all of this to break pretty thoroughly. So again, what chooses the right SLA? That's the next slide. But when it is chosen, a bunch of stuff happens. The first thing that happens is the SLA record ID of the matching SLA is populated into the incident record, in this case, incident.
Bill, we have a request you would go to presentation mode so that they can see the screen better. Right now we're seeing you and the screen. So if you can actually just flip it over to presentation mode, so you're just seeing the
Yeah, there we go.
we're just the screen. Okay.
I
But
don't
we're
claim
still-
to be the best presenter, so my apologies. Hopefully this is better.
It's not, because we're still seeing. Do you want to, like, in Teams, you want to actually flip to presentation so they're not seeing your screen, they're not seeing your video.
Anyone know how I do that?
Bill, you can
Possibly.
try just turning your video off. See if that helps.
There should be an option somewhere there to change.
Okay, I turned my camera off.
Please forgive us. This is our first time at this.
Is that better?
No, we're still seeing the buttons at the top. I mean, like, I see, like, the people. Sorry, that was me. I just raised my hand up, put it back down again. Go to your settings and dot, and maybe turn off the gallery.
We've also
So-
got people saying share the PowerPoint, not the Teams. Put the PowerPoint into presentation mode.
Hey, that's smart. I'll do that.
That'll work too.
Thanks, everyone. A
Fabulous.
little bit of a
Thanks.
learning curve today for this Microsoft Teams webinar.
Well, we're still seeing the, so if you go to the dot, Bill, do you have the gallery turned on or off?
It's off. I just turned it off.
Okay.
All right, so my apologies if this is not going well. We will share all of this afterwards. So
I'd be happy to email everyone with an attachment. The slide deck as an attachment, as well as the link to the presentation as well. So hopefully that'll be helpful.
all right, so getting back to this, once the right SLA is chosen, the SLA ID populates, a bunch of stuff auto-populates, the target times are selected, and a whole bunch of other stuff calculates. And now the question is, how is the winning SLA determined? Which one? So there is an expression on the SLA rec ID that does, this is, this box on the left looks at a stored value in the system. And out of the box in 10.2, and I think it was 9.6.3 and up, but I could be wrong. It uses the new time-based. The other way it could be is hierarchy-based. So we'll talk through these, but we'll look more at the time-based. So the time-based is this middle box.
Bill?
Yeah.
In later versions, that is controlled by a stored value that is set to hierarchical or time-based. And that's how Cherwell decides which one of those to use.
Yeah, that is what I was saying. So
okay.
This stored value at the bottom called SLA selection time-based. So out of the box, that is what it is set to. And if you look at this middle box is using the time value. There's expressions in here, and these go like 5 or 6 expressions deep, which is not why I do not have all screenshots of all of them. But what it says here in this middle box is literally which one of these has the shortest target time when it looks at it. And if it can't determine that, then it uses the default SLA. And then if you are using the older hierarchy based, which if some of you are on older content versions, you may very well be using this. It goes through and it does it in this order. So it's first is the CI, then service, then customer, and so on. So you can look through this expression and find it. And that's always going to be on the SLA rec ID and incident. So again, it looks at all of the service level agreements that apply and determines the shortest one in the more recent versions. Or in the oldest versions, it's a hierarchy of those possible SLA types of CI, service, customer, or corporate. And that means, of course, that you can change the order in this in the hierarchy one. So We could literally spend 2 or 3 hours just on the expressions in these 3 screenshots. It's really, really deep, but this is where all of the heavy lifting takes place in SLA, is the expressions in here. So feel free to go in on your own system, look at this. My email address is out there everywhere. I know it's in the community, it's on our website. If you ever have questions, feel free to email me directly. I answer questions all the time. So, but determining who the winning SLA is, it all happens right here in the SLA selection on the calculated value for the SLA rec ID. I'm going to move on because there's a lot in this slide, but that's how it is, excuse me, determined. Okay, so the created during field we talked about a little bit earlier, and that gets set at the time the incident is created, and that determines which calendar to use. So if created during happens to say weekends, then the system knows not to start the time until we hit the calendar defined in whichever SLA applies to the incident. You can have multiple calendars, and multiple calendars can sometimes overlap. That is definitely an advanced use case that takes some planning and probably a lot of testing. But in that case, you may have to update the expressions in created during to correctly apply those calendars. So most people don't really even look at this created during very much. It can be easy to ignore, but it's used pretty heavily in the calculation of the times and dates. So if you're having issues with SLAs that you're making custom, I would double check the expressions in here as well. So here's just a screenshot of the expression on created during. And it's pretty straightforward, but it's just doing date calculations on the current time and date and then choosing the calendar. And as you can see, these are actual calendar names in here. So here's one of them, for example. So if you have multiple calendars, you might have to update this, as we said. All right. So we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I'm going to come back to it now that we've talked about the actual calculations and how it figures out which SLA applies. And since they all could have different response and breach warnings, again, changing the status to pending does not change the SLA breach date. That can do interesting things to your reporting. So you might have a report that says, show me all of the SLAs that breached, or all the incidents that are going to breach today. The ones that are impending will still be listed as going to breach today because the time cannot update until it comes out of pending, so it knows how much time to add back to those warning and breach time clocks. It's a little bit counterintuitive, but there's really no other way for it to calculate it when you're not using the 24/7 calendar, which for most people using SLA is how they set it up. They have like the 8 to 5 calendar or whatever. So, okay, maintenance. You need to update your calendars every year. I usually set or have customers set a reminder for around the beginning of December to update the calendar. So you have to update the work hours, which doesn't really change for most organizations, but the holidays do change. So if July 4th was on a weekday when I was working with the US Postal Service, it would be a holiday, but if it was on a Saturday or Sunday, the preceding or following weekday would be a federal holiday. So those change for a lot of companies every year. So there is a little bit of maintenance to do. You can do it in about 10 minutes. It's not difficult, but you have to be aware of it or you'll start getting SLA breaches on holidays. So, and then that covers most of my content. We do have some other things that we could go through, but I suspect there's going to be more questions, and I don't know if Kim wants to add anything else in here. And if there are questions, we can certainly go and look at things inside the application itself. Okay, I just saw Nick's comment about the focus.
Yeah, that is the answer. So if you go to the 3 dots in Teams and click focus, then you will just get the presentation.
I don't even have that as an option, actually.
You may not because you're a presenter, but the rest of us do.
Okay. Oh, so that's an individual setting.
Correct.
Okay.
Couple of ways to send in questions. Feel free to put them into the chat. You'll see the little
Jason,
word bubble button, or there's a raise your hand. If you see the little smiley face with the hand looking like he's waiting on a high five, if you click on that, you'll be able to raise your hand and we can unmute you if you'd rather speak directly. So either way, feel free to send those questions in. I do see a couple of questions popping in. Do you want us to read them too, Bill, or do you want to find them in the chat?
I'll take them in reverse order. So I'm still sharing. So for building a new SLA with new target times and a new priority matrix, if you go to help.cherwell.com and just search for SLA Priority Spreadsheet. So that's the easy one.
I think he was asking how does he view SLAs? So
no, that was the question above this one. I'm doing it in reverse order because I'm already sharing this.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
So I'm going to switch out of sharing this and back to sharing the shareable screen. Okay, apparently I have to share my entire desktop, sorry, because it wasn't listing the Cherwell window as that option. So if you're completely new to this, the easiest way to see these is just go to the searching menu, go to quick search builder, choose SLA. You can just remove the search criteria so you get everything. And that's how you get to them. So again, depending on what version you are, these might be slightly different, but these, I think these 8 have been with the Cherwell out of the box content for a really long time. So hop back to the meeting.
Especially if you'd like, Bill, we can read the questions to you so that you don't have to flip back and forth.
Sure.
Okay. So I think the next question was that I see is from if you change. Oh, hold on a second. I'm sorry. It just rolled on me. If you change classification after the ticket is created, does SLA changes according to the new service classification?
Yeah, it can. It definitely can.
It basically changes whenever any information changes on the ticket that is going to affect the calculated SLA.
Yeah. So that's a change to service, a change to priority, a change to the associated CI, or a change to the customer. Any of those can cause it to recalculate.
Kevin asked, would you recommend associating SLAs to categories or subcategories? Services seem too generic to ever be useful for our use cases. I know this isn't supported out of the box.
You definitely can. Go for it.
Okay. Kevin, I have indeed done exactly that for service for the categories and for subcategories. Oftentimes, there may be one subcategory or something like that that will need to override the SLA that is selected at the service level, at the service. And so that would actually have to get added into all of your calculations that decides which SLA wins. So that may require changes to your created drain, and that may also require changes to the calculations for the times that to the SLA chooser. There's an expression called SLA chooser, which is actually what decides which SLA is going to be the one that's picked up. Okay, sorry, Bill. I just haven't had experience with that one. Christopher gave a link to the worksheet. Thank you, Christopher. And Adam says, we changed service request priorities to only 2, urgent and standard. How do I make the priority drop down not use the priority matrix and just list the 2 priorities like a drop down list?
So you'd have to change the control on the incident form. I assume you mean you're asking for the incident form and not in the configuration of the SLAs, but you would have to change the control to not be a matrix selector and then to be driven off of the instant priority lookup table. I don't know what that would break, however.
If you
It might cut-
actually just drag the priority back onto the form and delete the current control. The current control is a matrix selector, like Bill said, and then just re-drag the priority onto the form, and then you'll have a normal drop-down. Sorry, Bill.
Stop apologizing. It's fine. I'm more than happy to talk through any of these, and you've done it more than I have, so it's good.
Kevin Davis asks, is there a specific SLA for VIPs?
Out of the box, yeah, there is. So typically that's this platinum one. And you're like, okay, so how do I make this work? That's actually a good question. So if I go in and look at this, I can actually see the customers that are associated to this. This is to the SLA itself. So these people are VIPs. And if I go in and I look at this customer record, you can see the SLA subscription level for this person is set to platinum. For most customers, this is just blank, and that causes the corporate overarching SLA to be the default for them. But if you set this within the system at whatever level, and bronze is usually like contractors. If you get to the level where you're doing this specifically for individual, this is one more thing to maintain, obviously, but for your VIPs, you might, excuse me, you might want to do this.
Bill,
Yep.
if you are going to set the SLA subscription level, you also need a corresponding SLA that matches that, so that they can pick that up. Otherwise, if he's right, it's not going to do anything if you don't have a matching SLA.
Yep. So you have to set that, both of those. So I don't know why Cherwell chose to make this two separate things. I don't know what their design philosophy was there, but yes, you do have to fill both of them out. So. All right, are there more questions?
Where can we, excuse me, I'm sorry, Momita Bakat Anil Kumar asks, when we can check the configuration or how the SLA works when we change the service classification in the tick?
Okay, so what that implies is that you want different SLAs for different services. So that calculates out of the box if you have them set up. So there's one here that's really meant as an example. So this is the email service, right? So assuming there isn't another competing winning SLA like a VIP, if an incident comes in and it has a service of the email type, you can set individual target times. So you can see these are set here. There's response time for service requests that are priority 1 of 1 hour. And you could do this for other services. So you could create a new service and for any of your services and make this work out. You might have to go update those expressions, possibly, but I think out of the box, you don't have to if you're just creating a new service type SLA. So again, that's controlled by this, and then choosing the service that gets associated with it. So.
Bill, one thing you did not go over that I just saw you just touched on just a second ago was the whole idea of the priority group. I'm not sure if people on this call are familiar with the fact that you can actually have different matrices for different types of events that are happening. You have a normal standard, it's called, priority for grouping for incident and a priority grouping for request that can have different urgencies and impacts. as you can see here by what Bill's showing, because you'll notice that the urgency and impact between a service request and the urgency and impact between an incident are different. Well, that's going to show which columns and rows to show on your matrix. Now, for example, Bill just had the email and calendaring one up there, and down at the bottom it said that it was using a type of email and calendaring, a priority group of email and calendaring. That matrix is different than the standard out-of-box matrix. So if you do have a service of email and calendaring, you are going to receive a different matrix than the standard one. You're still going to equate to the same priorities, but you are going to get a different matrix. If you want to open a new incident, Bill, pick email and calendaring, you can actually show that.
Nice.
Search on mail. There we go.
So any of these will work.
Yeah, any of those should work. So then if you go to the priority matrix when it comes up, yeah, you click on service, click on one of the service request ones. I did see it using the different matrix, but I'm not sure why. Let's go ahead and.
So I think that's all the request access ones are service. Yeah, now it's a service request.
Okay, so.
So now, yeah, you can see this changed.
This is different than I think. Well, it can. This matrix can be different. The objective there, and I'm not sure if it's set up out of box that way, but you because it did have that email and calendaring priority grouping, priority group, it can actually show a different matrix. So if your services have different urgencies and different impacts, they could actually show a different matrix based on their SLA.
And that's where that spreadsheet comes in really, really handy if you are starting from scratch. If you're not starting from scratch, most of this will be there and you can just update it if you need to. Are there more questions or are we?
Hang on just a second here. Let me go back. So Brian Crabtree asked, I'm sorry for the rudimentary question. How do I find business calendars?
That's actually a good question because it's a little bit hidden. But this calendar manager wasn't always in this list. And you think, hey, I found it, right? Nope. I don't know why they did it this way. It's really goofy, but if you go out of here, you go out of the blueprint.
Stop, go back into there.
All right.
Because it's in multiple places. Go back to your
Right.
manager.
Okay.
It's business hours right there, right above the calendar manager where you just worked.
Thank you. You can also get to business hours outside of a blueprint, but
yes, you can. Just wanted you to stay here first, and then we'll go out.
Yeah. So one of the quirks is that I've been working with a customer full time for 4 years, and they have not upgraded all the way to 10. So I'm not as used to 10 as I am 9.7. So yes, you can get to it under the business hours, and these are all really pretty straightforward to understand. But you can actually get to it not in a blueprint as well. So if you go to automation processes, it's also here under business hours. That brings you to the exact same place. So you can actually make changes into it here without publishing into a blueprint. Process-wise, it's probably easier to do it in a blueprint just to move it from your dev to test to prod or whatever your promotion rules are for bringing new code up. But the nice thing is when you do it in a blueprint, you can have it ready to go and then just schedule it right away, for somebody to publish right away on the last day of the year or something, so it updates.
Also, it was available in blueprints. It was not eligible to be moved through a blueprint, which made it a little bit more awkward. You could export and import from here, but like now, making it part of a blueprint, you can make it a part of your scheduled changes. So AJ asked, out of box, signing SLA to owners, do they have full authority to review, manage, update SLA without an SLA manager or team? Or is it closer to out of box how knowledge management works and really requires an individual team to manage all SLAs?
Right, and so what he's asking for right here is, I'm sorry, I'm not in the SLAs, I'm in the incident. So Kim, I don't actually know the answer to that. I can go into the permissions and figure it out, but that'll take a few minutes. So you can see that up here in the upper right corner, it's assigned to Gina in the IT management group. So I believe she has the ability to update and edit this, but you can see I don't have that ability right now. There's a couple reasons for that. One, it's active, right? You can't make changes to it when it's active. You have to set it back to planning and then promote it to active again. I didn't actually cover that earlier either, but
anybody with anybody who has the authority to work with SLA, which should be, I think any of the manager groups, it's not as like locked down as knowledge management is. So knowledge management is pretty locked down that only the knowledge management team can manage the knowledge management. SLAs are a little bit more open in that some of the second level and third level teams, security groups, can actually manage the SLAs.
So it looks like out of the box, IT Service Desk Manager has the ability to do it. So anybody with that security role. So yeah, so they'd have to have the security role of IT Service Desk Manager or above.
Okay, so we do have one more question here. Stephen Joyce asks, can certain teams be exempt from SLA if customer groups also logged in incident and service requests but are not obligated to respond and resolve until they start moving to a different team that starts servicing upon customer approval?
So yeah, that should be possible. It would definitely be a customization to the system, but you would just have to, that expression that I showed you on the SLA rec ID, you would have to add something in there that just evaluated the SLA rec ID to empty if whatever your condition was met. So maybe you have a checkbox on the customer form that says exempt from SLAs, or it could be on the assigned user, but on the assigned user, it's going to get tricky because out of the box, as I showed you, an SLA applies right away. And that's before you've chosen a team. So and again, you can make it reevaluate on a change of that, but it would be a customization. Kim, I don't know what, if anything,
Yes,
you can add to that.
I actually have done this for one of our customers. Basically, there are certain conditions if those calculate, then we would basically pause the SLA or exempt the SLA at that case. So there are ways to do that, but that is definitely not out of box. That is like not even a first level, SLA. I mean, those are advanced changes, but they are possible to do. We do have another. Momita says, if we have issues with response and resolve breach, and if we have 24/7 period, so we can change to the selected time and then create the new business hours with 24/7 and try once. Just need ideas for troubleshooting.
Yeah, you could definitely do that. If you're having issues with it calculating right, I would create that 24/7 calendar and give it a try, because to change that in the target times would really only take you a few minutes once you've created the calendars.
Yeah, would you mind going to the target times, please?
Sure.
One last thing that I might want to make mention of, there is the work hours that is actually not filled in out of the box. See the one underneath the priority between priority and uses default there? right where your almost where your hand is, right there.
Right there.
Suggest actually selecting your time, because you know that use as checkbox, use as default checkbox is selected right beneath that, and so it's actually going to look at that field for your clock, and it's going to say I don't have a clock. So if you're running into issues and you can't make it work, make sure you have that default work hours filled in that box that Bill has his hand on, because that will make a difference.
Yeah, it can calculate right if other things are set, but there's definitely issues with that too. Pretty much every morning I start the day by, driving my kids to school, and then I sit down with a cup of coffee and look at the community. And I usually see questions in there. If I see anything on SLAs, I will respond. So you can either email me if you have additional questions. You can put it in the community. There's some very active people in there who are very knowledgeable. Graham Moore and Rob Knox are always contributing in there. There's probably 24 other people that are really frequent contributors. I'm in there quite often, and we'll figure it out for you. I mean, we've helped a lot of people, and you're like, okay, you're a consulting company, you're trying to get business, and that is of course true. We're always trying to do that, but we're also helping people a lot outside of that who are not customers. It has just been something we've done forever and will continue to do, and we don't mind it at all. I actually think it's really interesting seeing some of the solutions people put in the community that I would have never ever come up with. So.
And I'm not always on the community as much as Bill because they don't let me. However, if you ever have a question for me, you're welcome to email me as well.
So, were there any other questions in the chat? We're over the hour mark here. I'm sure people need to get moving. Okay. Well, then I think I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming. And wait, did you start to interject? There's another question.
Nope.
I think that was just me, Bill. I was just going to thank everyone for attending and let them know that we will be sending out the recorded link and the slide deck in the coming days.
All right. Thank you very much. And everybody have a good day.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.